This podcast is rated E for explicit.
As, artist, you have these visions of what it is that you want to have materialize. And when it doesn't happen in the way that you would like, and maybe in the time frame that you would like, you're really hard on yourself about that. And it feels like you're a failure, like you're failing, like you're falling from your potential.
Do you think coming back with this new episode is going to help with that? It's going to kind of shine some new light on the world?
Well, I look at it as we have to start somewhere. We have to start somewhere. And when I kind of hear that creative voice, energy, and all of that coming back and talking to me about, okay, what's next? And I have something concrete, then I'm like, okay, I have something. We can proceed. It's been 6 months, but we can proceed.
I think it's time.
Yeah, we can proceed.
You met me in the midst of many things. Shedding skin, sprout wings. Looking at life as a spiritual being through a human lens. Having conversations with God about so many things. This show is your invitation. The poet God is the conversation.
Sometimes it's the thing which seems insignificant, rudimentary, or ordinary that tips the scales from what appears to be functioning normally into insanity. For most people, dysfunction may not be so apparent. And of course, it's impossible to know what's going on in someone's mind. And not everyone is able to explain such complexities to you. And even if they could, not everyone is able to understand or be understood. There are many things that we do and pursue in our everyday lives that are considered big and small, like going to work or school, or to the doctor and the dentist. And the less significant chores like cleaning your house, buying groceries, doing your laundry, and making up your bed, if you manage to get out of it. Because what comes easy for you, someone else in a particular state of mind may find very difficult to do. But the point is, we lead these lives because we believe in something that drives us to do it. Whether it's the joy it gives us from taking care of our families or excelling in our work or academic pursuits. But what I'm asking you to consider is what happens if you no longer feel the love for none of it. What happens then? Well, what happens is you start to feel the weight of the necessity, the responsibility, and suddenly it feels like life is too heavy. And despite the disaster you know will unfold when the proverbial levee no longer holds, it feels like there's no fight left in your soul. And people think because you're not crying that you're good. They don't know that you'd cry if you could. Your heart breaks as you watch things fall apart. And your ears hurt because you're tired of hearing people tell you what you should feel in your heart. And you wish something inside would awake so you'd start living again. But when you're paralyzed inside, time is no friend. As you start to notice the hours, you wonder, when will it end? Time becomes something to bear rather than something to look forward to. And because you no longer take pleasure in things great or small, you become unwilling to deal with what were once considered minor inconveniences that are now mountains too tall. The millions of people around the world who have suffered from depression understand the fall. Dwayne Johnson.
I found that with depression, one of the most important things you could realize is that you're not alone. You're not the first to go through it. You're not going to be the last to go through it. And oftentimes it happens. You feel like you're alone, and you feel like it's only you, and you're in your bubble. And I wish I had someone at that time who could just pull me aside and, hey, it's going to be okay. It'll be okay. So I wish I knew that. Just got to remember. Hold on to that fundamental quality of faith. Have faith that on the other side of your pain is something good.
In my conversation with our new producer, Calvin, which you'll hear later in the program, I shared a few scenes from one of my favorite movies called The Hours, starring Nicole Kidman and Meryl Streep. It's a film about how the novel Mrs. Dalloway affects 3 generations of women, all of whom in one way or another experienced depression and suicide in their lives. In this scene, Meryl Streep's character visits a sick friend to help him prepare for a ceremony where he's to be awarded for his literary accomplishments.
Mrs. Dalloway, it's you.
Yes, it's me. It's me.
Come in.
Richard, it's a beautiful morning. How about we let in a little more light?
Is it still morning?
Yes, it is.
Have I died? Good morning, my dear.
Any visitors?
Yes.
Are they still here?
No, they've gone.
How'd they look?
Today, sort of like black fire. I mean, sort of light and dark at the same time. There was one a bit like an electrified jellyfish. They were singing. May have been Greek.
So the ceremony is at 5. You remember? And then the party is right after. They did bring you breakfast, didn't they?
What a question, of course.
Richard, you did eat it.
Well, can you see it? Is it here? Is there any breakfast lying around?
No, I don't see it.
Well, then I must have eaten it, mustn't I?
I suppose.
Does it matter?
Of course it matters. You know what the doctors say. Have you been skipping pills?
Of course, I can't take this.
Take what?
Having to be proud and brave in front of everybody.
Honey, it's not a performance.
Of course it is. I got the prize for my performance.
Well, that is nonsense.
I got the prize for having AIDS and going nuts, being brave about it. I actually got the prize for having come through.
It's not true.
For surviving.
It's
That's
not
what I got the
true.
prize for. Oh, you think they would have given it to me if I were healthy?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I do.
Is it here somewhere?
What?
The prize. I'd like to look at it.
No, you haven't gotten it yet. It's tonight.
Are you sure? I remember the ceremony perfectly. I seem to have fallen out of time.
Richard. Richard. It's a party. It's only a party. Populated entirely by people who respect and admire you.
Small party, is it? Select party, is it?
Your friends.
I thought I lost all my friends. I thought I drove my friends crazy. Oh, Mrs. Dalloway. Always giving parties to cover the silence.
Richard, you won't need to do anything. All you have to do is appear. Sit on the sofa. And I will be there. This is a group of people who want to tell you your work is going to live.
Oh, is it? Is my work going to live? I can't go through with it, Clarissa.
Why do you say that?
I can't.
Why?
Because I wanted to be a writer, that's all.
So?
I wanted to write about it all. Everything that happens in a moment. The way the flowers looked when you carried them in your arms. This towel, how it smells, how it feels. This thread. All our feelings. Yours and mine. The history of it. Who we once were. Everything in the world. Everything all mixed up. Like it's all mixed up now. And I failed. I failed. No matter what you start with, it ends up being so much less. Sheer fucking pride and stupidity.
Coming up next, producer Calvin talks about what struck him about this scene. We'll be right back after this short break. Listen, I know you've been thinking about starting a podcast, and trust me, I am tired of hearing you think about it. And this ad is too short for me to explain telepathic abilities to you. But what I will tell you is that you can do it for free and be as cheap as you are and as cheap as you want to be. And Anchor has the tools for you to do so creatively. Now, as soon as you submit, your friends can listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever they prefer to listen to the shit. And you can make money on a little thing called listenership. So just get to it and download the free Anchor app. Or go to anchor.fm to get started.
It struck me immediately as something that, as a metaphor, we all tend to do, is where, people are always talking about drowning things out, right? The silence is usually the stuff that we don't want to talk about, the stuff that we're all thinking about, right? And the parties are a way to escape that without ever having to address something that we really should be addressing instead. Instead, we put it off for another day because now we've got this big party to plan.
True.
Right. And I think that it struck me so much because it is something that is very common. It's very human. And it's also very, very, it's very telling when there's something that you just don't want to be burdened with. It's always the little things, that throw us over the edge, but it's the bigger things that we are constantly silent about.
Maybe it's not wanting to be burdened by it, but just knowing that you just can't carry that right now.
But what's the definition of burden?
True. I know.
I mean, because you and I are saying the same thing.
Yeah.
But I think your approach is maybe a little bit different from mine, because I do believe that when you look at what we do on a daily basis, we all have things like that, right? But when that something is shared between people, it's always easy to just gloss over it.
Right.
We could stare at each other, having that big elephant in the room, and decide at the end of the day, I'd just rather have a party.
Although the elephant in the room farting up a place and sticking up a place, and you're still there acting like it's not there, right?
Exactly.
The line that stuck out for me in that scene was when he talked about everything being mixed up. And because a lot of times that's what it feels like. So much is happening at the same time, and that you have to sit there and make sense of it and unpack it and sort it out. And sometimes you just don't want to do any of that, so you just do nothing, and it seems like it paralyzes you.
That's a good point, man. It's funny that because it didn't strike me very much, and maybe it's because my mentality has been a little bit different. I tend to, whenever things are mixed up, my next question is, well, how do we fix it? I tend not to be paralyzed by it, and I know that I'm not regular when it comes to that. But I didn't get struck by that, just because I was like, oh, well, then what's the next step? And that's one of the reasons I wanted to hear the rest of how she approached it, because I thought she might offer next steps.
Yeah. Well, she appeared to be gutted by that line in the first place. The way he started that conversation, it just seemed to throw her like she couldn't even function after that. She was just, because he totally interrupted her vibe. She was in this thing of party mode, like, let's figure out what we're gonna do. What time do I have to pick you up? And then he hits her with, you always try parties to cover the silence. Her out.
Well, let's take it back a few seconds before, right? The real turning point for me was when she asked, did they bring breakfast? Did they bring breakfast? Because her voice changed, her tone changed, her visual changed, and she went into panic mode. Did you eat it? You know, it was really, really interesting to me that even though it's his issue, she's the one who felt the emotion about it, and the concern about it, and the worry about it, instead of actually being him being concerned and worried about whether or not he ate.
Right.
And to me, that's when that whole scene changed. And I thought it was great that he picked up on it and basically pushed back. Because right after that is when he was talking about the parties and so forth. I mean, not obviously right after that, but that's to me the tonal change of that scene.
Because I think his frustration with her is that you're coming over here talking to me about things that do not hold the same weight with me as it does with you.
Exactly.
And I need for you to understand that and to see it and to feel it in the way that I feel it. And I think that his words were pointed for that reason, for that purpose, and towards that direction.
So what are you implying? What are you saying? And his response was, I'm not implying anything. I'm just saying. And I thought that was great that, you know, he, just like you said, he forced the issue. And he wanted her to be able to see this up front.
And you know, and the brilliance about that movie for me, and that movie has many memorable scenes. I used it, I watched it so many times, and times where I was trying to sort out.
It's a sad movie.
Yeah, it's a lot. Yeah. But for some reason it was a tool of validation for me and the things that I was feeling when I was dealing with a lot of the things I was dealing with when I watched it over and over again. And so as of late, and as of me trying to get back to me, that was one of the things that came, that scene came to the forefront, because it felt like it validated what I've been feeling for the last 3 months and so forth, in this war and struggle that I've spoke to in the last episode, in terms of where I'm at, and, you know, this transitional feeling of being torn, you know, in all these different ways. And I guess in some ways it's growing pains, you know, because again, we get back to shedding skin, sprouting wings, and gosh, like, I'm thinking to myself that slogan or those words were so prophetic.
I agree.
To how things are playing out when I started this podcast last year, and with every intention of how prolific and consistent it was going to be, and it so really hasn't worked out that way.
Yeah, but to my opinion, it doesn't matter as long as the message you're delivering is on point every time you do deliver it.
Oh, that resonated. Yes, I think I'll hold that near whenever I think, my God, I wish I was more consistent.
Yeah, just deliver the best message you can.
Yeah.
We'll be right back after this short break. Have you ever thought about starting your own podcast? When I was trying to get this podcast off the ground, I had so many questions. Like, how do I record an episode? Where do I find background music? How do I get to show my podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all the other places people like to listen? And where do I find advertisers? The answer to every one of those questions is really simple. Anchor. Anchor is the one-stop shop for recording, hosting, distributing, and monetizing your podcast. And best of all, it's 100% free and 100% ridiculously easy to use. Personally, I like that Anchor allows me to focus on being creative while they handle all the less interesting details about producing a podcast. So if you've always wanted to start a podcast, go to anchor.fm/start to join me and the diverse community of podcasters already using Anchor. That's anchor.fm/start. I can't wait to hear your podcast.
I got up one morning, made breakfast, went to the bus stop, got on a bus. I'd left a note. I got a job in a library in Canada. It would be wonderful to say you regretted it. It would be easy. But what does it mean? What does it mean to regret when you have no choice? It's what you can bear.
That clip was of a mother and a wife who had abandoned her family. She spoke of a life that she was no longer equipped to live, and as a result, she contemplated suicide, and in the end, chose to live. But for her, that choice meant that what would have to die instead was the life she had formerly led. We all have these moments in life when things we were unaware of become real. One such moment for me was coming home from work one day in the early 2000s, standing in front of a full-length mirror. I stood in front of that mirror because earlier that day, a lady who was concerned pulled me aside and said she had noticed I had lost a lot of weight. She asked if everything was okay. It was true that I had not been eating, but I didn't notice the effect it was having until I took my shirt off and saw my ribcage in a way I had never seen it before. It was shocking that things had gotten to that point, and I hadn't even noticed. I had become numb to a lot of things during that time. I felt a desire for nothing, and having to eat was an annoyance because I didn't enjoy it. At the end of the hours, Virginia Woolf, played by Nicole Kidman, committed suicide by walking into a river, allowing it to sweep her away. doing what probably felt like the easiest thing she had done that day. But it was the words she left her husband, Leonard, in her final letter to him that epitomized what this film meant to me. It has become a part of me in a way I cannot untangle or unwind. And what she says will remain with me for all of time. Because what she says is from the heart of a woman who loved her husband desperately. And she wanted to hold on as long as she could for him. For he was the last thing that she felt anything for. And she did hold on until she couldn't anymore. And then she writes the words that will remain in my heart forever. Dear Leonard, to look life in the face.
Always to look life in the face. And to know it for what it is. At last, to know it. To love it for what it is. And then to put it away. Leonard, always the years between us. Always the years. Always the love.
Always
the hours.
I'm Akil Johnson, the Poet God. Thank you for listening.